Check 1 2. there and the bottom. Like a field note or something like that.
Call this meeting of the school committee for the city of Lewiston, Maine to order for Monday, October the 3rd, 2022. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is school committee member introductions, and I would personally like to welcome Hannah Dwale. She's one of our new student reps here, so welcome. Good to have you.
Thank
you. You're welcome. We would start with Ms. Scott.
Linda Scott, City Council Representative.
Paul Beauplan, Ward 7.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Megan Parks at large.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Hannah Dwale, Senior Representative.
Thank you, everyone. The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Are there any items that members would want to remove from the consent agenda? Seeing none, the consent agenda is adopted as presented. Agenda item number 4 is public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes now on non-agenda items and on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, and/or student issues should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comment should be directed to the school committee, be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and affiliation to Lewiston Public Schools. Is there anyone in attendance who would like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close this public hearing. Next item on the agenda is to recognize Lewiston Public School staff. Mr. Superintendent.
So we have 2 amazing staff that we want to recognize tonight. And the first one, I will ask Principal Tiffany Demers to come up to please share a little bit about Carissa Nelson, who has done some great things with the arts.
Good evening, everyone. Today I have Carissa Nelson with us. She is one of our music teachers actually at Montello School. And I'll tell you a little bit what makes her a great educational leader just in her classroom, but also what really allows her leadership to stand out in sort of a unique way. So one thing about Carissa is, I guess I'll start by saying if you walk through the hallways and a 1st or 2nd grade classroom is coming down the hall, you'll notice they're waving this little piece of paper if they've come from music class and they're super proud of themselves. So Carissa is known school-wide for giving out rock cards. It's really hard to build relationships and positively recognize 600 students. And Carissa finds a way to do that every day, and multiple students are so excited to get that rock card, and that might be their one moment of success for the day. So we're super excited that she's able to build that rapport and relationships with students. In a different way, she is also a leader. She is someone who really can see things from lots of different perspectives. This allows her to be really impactful on our school leadership team. And she is somebody who really thinks about equity first. And one thing you might know about music teachers is that they often have a chorus that they operate sort of in extra time that she has. So Carissa has a chorus. She brings them to district concerts, and those are, correct me if I'm wrong, are those statewide?
District-wide, so area schools.
Okay, so
like
you guys are traveling usually.
Portland, Auburn, Old Orchard Beach, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so one of the things Carissa does, and I know she does this because we've had lots of conversations, but she really advocates for our community when those things are being planned. So some ways that she's really demonstrated some leadership. She actually has the folks at the planning table really consider religious holidays when they're planning those events. Oftentimes those things have happened during Ramadan and when we have a lot of students who would not be able to participate. And Carissa has been the voice and the leader saying, hey, could we hold on and think about a different time because this could or could not impact a group of my students. So that's an amazing quality to have in Lewiston, somebody who can advocate for us on a community level. She also thinks about transportation. So when transportation is a barrier and the event is in Portland, she really works to make sure those kids can attend. So there are things that Carissa does that people don't often know about. She's not just a teacher, she is a leader in lots of ways and is really a leader in Lewiston. So I just wanted to recognize her for that today.
I mean, do you have to?
Next up, I'd actually ask our HR director, Susanna Galan, if she'd come up to the podium to do a little bit of an introduction also. But we have some folks in last meeting, we actually talked about someone from HR who really their institutional knowledge helps keep this thing running. And it's a big machine. It really is and has a lot of pieces. But Celeste Patry has, for I don't even know how many years, been a very loyal person who works hours we don't see, who finds ways to get things done that are just unimaginable, very similar to what we discussed last meeting. But with the influx of everything certification, this is part of her world. And when I say influx, I mean every waiver, every emergency certification. She knows more about people than probably anybody in the room because she has to. And so part of her function in HR and many other hats is really centered in around that certification piece and a lot of state data and reporting. It's important work, it's detail work, and without the certification work, we don't get our subsidy and people can't work. And so her work to chase that is very meaningful to our district. But the other thing that Celeste can offer is if you need to know about anything else, you can call her, and if she can't tell you, she can find it for you or send it to the right person. She just has the institutional knowledge. I know that she's been very helpful in Susanna's transition, and want to just give you a chance to add to the kudos. So let's thank you for everything.
Thank you. 22 years. That's how long she's been with LPS, nearly a quarter of a century. Half the time I've been on this earth, almost. Celeste brings a lot to LPS, particularly to HR. She is making sure that every single employee that walks through our doors is certified and prepared to do their job. She is double checking and triple checking to make sure that our teachers have what they need and know what they need and what their next step is going to be. You're coming up for expiration. She's reminding you, she's making sure that everyone is aware of what the DOE needs and being that bridge for us, because the DOE right now is moving in so many directions that, you know, yes, we're the second largest school district, but we're another cog in their wheel every day, and Celeste is our squeaky spoke. So she keeps that moving for us. She has been a rock for HR, for payroll. That's where she originally started, I believe. And she builds that bridge between our departments. So we understand when we're processing something in HR, what that's going to do and what that effect is going to be, and vice versa. So super helpful, my go-to person for anything and everything. And like Superintendent Langley said, if you need something and you don't know where to start with Celeste, because you probably won't have too far of a trip if you do that. So Celeste, thank you very much. I appreciate you greatly.
Thank you to both of you and to all of our staff. We couldn't do it without you for sure, so keep up the great work. The next item on the agenda is to review and potentially vote on the first reading of several of our policies. I think we probably would want to do these individually. The first item on it is 6A. This is policy BHC, which is school committee relationships and communications with staff. Ms. Paquette.
All right, so policy subcommittee, we cranked through quite a few the last time, so I'm gonna go back to my notes. So BHC, school committee relationships and communication with staff. This is not a policy that is in our current policy manual. Through our audit of our policy manual a couple of years ago, this was a policy that was recommended that be added. So this is a brand new policy, which is why you don't see any redlining on the document that's in front of you, except for the redlining that happened through the discussion of the sample policy. So the redlining happened because the policy subcommittee said this was in the suggested policy, and the policy subcommittee said we would like to strike that out. So to be clear, this isn't a policy that's in our policy manual, and the red line is a redlining of the sample policy based on the discussion of the policy subcommittee or addition of language.
Questions or comments? Ms. Whitlow.
Yeah, I just wanted to to talk about the red lines that we edited a little bit. And the suggestive language was that teachers and staff should not have any direct communication with the school board, and we just don't think that would be acceptable, because we want teachers to be able to reach out, email us, talk to us about things, and not that we've got to dive into it with them, outside of the school board, but if they've got issues, we want to hear it and we want to address it. And so to take out that communication between staff and teachers just wasn't acceptable to us.
Ms. Scott.
Thank you. So just a question on that. So I fully agree that we should be able to have a teacher email us and that sort of thing. But I think that we also want to remember that we can't individually speak for the school committee, right? So I'm wondering if there should be is there a spot in there? Am I missing it?
And I can respond to that. So a little bit further down on the second page of this, at the bottom, there's 4 or 5 words put in red. You see that? So it starts with communications with staff are the responsibility of the school committee as a whole. Individual school committee members should refrain from initiating communications or conversations related to school committee business with staff members on their own. Do you see that? And I think our intent there was to make sure that if we're picking up our kids from school and a teacher is complaining about something and we don't want to engage them, we want to listen to them, but we don't want to engage them and try to say, okay, well, we'll take care of that or something like that outside of the boardroom. And I think hoping, but if you have any suggestions how we might be able to tweak that, we'd be up for it.
I think that would work. I do. I just would hope that when we talk about, new committee member orientation, making sure that this stuff is really discussed as we're moving through. So that there's no misunderstanding with somebody new, that they could have that communication. I recall several years ago when there were several teachers reaching out to certain school committee members because of disagreement with some things that were happening. And it can correlate to being issues between the school committee, the superintendent, and other situations that there's not full communication to the person that's actually in charge, which is the superintendent. So I just want to make sure that that's covered there.
Ms. Parks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that in the policy subcommittee, we really talked about trying to find the balance. In the past, we've gotten feedback from teachers or school administration staff that they feel like they can't communicate with the school committee, that they're blocked, they're not allowed, they've been told they're not allowed, things like that. And so I think we wanted to make sure that everyone in Lewiston Public Schools know that they can reach out to us. But also we're not going to engage in that. We're going to fix it all for you. We're going to bring it back to the appropriate channel and address it through the superintendent, the whole committee, that kind of stuff. I think that's what we were trying to find a balance with, and I hope we did.
I'll say quickly that this language was, I think, easy to work through with the subcommittee, but also this committee functions appropriately. And so I think sometimes when we talk about these items, maybe somebody else who's just listening thinks that something's gone on. This is a regular review of policy, but also, again, from my spot, this committee has functioned very appropriately. Lots of listening, lots of communication with staff, but also when needed, appropriate sharing of information so that we can try to keep things going as well as we can.
Ms. Whitlow.
I'll make a motion to approve policy BHC as presented.
Mr. Beauplan.
Second that motion.
Is there further discussion? Ms. Scott.
Just for clarification, that's for the first reading, right? Okay.
Right, this is a first reading. This will come back at I guess, our next regularly scheduled school committee meeting. Anything else from anyone? Seeing none, all in favor? So moved. That is 8-0. That was Ms. Whitlow and Ms. Scott, right? Mr. Beauplan. Okay, the next item is 6B. New school committee member orientation.
Okay, so new school committee member orientation is a policy in our policy manual, and you will see on the draft that you have the language in red that was added and the language in red that was taken out, or we're recommending is to be taken out. And I just want to add that there's a few things in this policy that were added because they were in a variety of other places, and so we put them here so that we could be clear about what it was in terms of new board member or new school committee member orientation. So these are the items that we would, as Linda said, go through and walk through in that orientation that we all experienced almost a little less than a year ago here in this room, as well as other things that might have happened with orientating yourselves to the school district.
Questions, comments? Seeing none, I'd take a motion.
I'll make a motion to pass. Which one is this?
This is
It's BIA. Thank you.
School committee orientation. So we have a motion by Ms. Bowden and a second by Ms. Hurd.
Yes.
Yes. Any further discussion? All in favor? It's 8-0, so moved. Next item is BIB, School Committee Member Development Opportunities.
Again, this is a policy to just review. It is in our policy manual, and you'll notice on the draft that you have, there was only a couple changes that we are suggesting to this policy.
Questions or comments? Mr. Beauplan.
So minor a matter, I'm questioning why I'm even bringing it up, but being the grammatician here, each member is singular and we're changing it to the they pronoun. Is that for gender issues or?
For equity issues, yes.
Thank you.
So we had a sort of back and forth conversation about the non-gender specific form of boardsmanship, and we couldn't figure out what word that would be. So that's why we switched it to school committee, because there really isn't a non-gender specific version of boardsmanship that we could come up with. So if someone has one, please let us know.
It takes somebody that's more of a wordsmith than me on that one. Anyway, Ms. Bird.
I would like to make a motion to approve the first reading of policy BIB, school committee member development opportunities.
Second,
Have a second by Ms. Whitlow. Any further discussion? All in favor? So moved, 8-0. Next item is 6D, BIC, School Committee Freedom of Access Law Training.
So this policy is a new policy for our policy manual. Again, was suggested by the audit of our policy manual to be added, and the red lines in this policy were just two, and that was to change he, she, and his, her to gender, to they and their.
Questions or comments? Ms. Whitlow.
I'll make a motion to approve first reading of BIC.
We have a second by Ms. Eames. Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. That's 8-0. Next item is 6E, CB, School Superintendent.
So again, not a lot of changes to this policy. This is a policy that is already in our policy manual. It really speaks to the function of the school committee and selecting of a superintendent, and then what the role of the superintendent is, and really minor changes to this policy to revise it.
Questions, comments? Ms. Bowden?
I'll just make a motion to approve CB, school superintendent.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Bowden, seconded by Mr. Beauplan.
I'd like to second the motion.
Thank you, Paul. Any further discussion? All in favor? That's 8-0. The next item on the agenda is 6F, CB-R, Superintendent of Schools Job Description.
So again, this one is in our policy manual already. There's only a couple items that we adjusted to match how our district is currently operating. You'll notice that these under supervises, instead of the all administrative and supervisory personnel of the school system, we changed that to directly or indirectly every school system employee. And then we added pre-K to the curriculum because we have pre-K and we are responsible for, the superintendent is responsible for that as well.
Questions, comments? Ms. Bowden?
Yeah, thank you. I just have a quick question. I don't know if it's like this if you print it or if it's like this for everybody, but pages 7 and pages 5 are completely blank. And so it's sort of like a spacing issue on this document. I don't.
It's because it was converted, I think, for you into a PDF from a
Oh.
Google Doc. So yes, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to make sure someone was aware before we passed it through.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We were just really making sure you were reading it.
Yeah.
Anything else? That's Mr. Beauplan.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from our superintendent if he thinks there's anything untenable in that or it's doable.
Well, I think it's pretty standard language that we've seen in all of the state-driven policy from main school management, and this is the language that fits. I didn't know that up until the second reading of this, I'm not responsible for pre-K, but I think that's going to land under other unspecified tasks.
Ms. Hurd.
I would like to make a motion to approve CB-R, please.
Okay. Is there a second? Ms. Bowden? Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. That's 8-0. The next one is 6G, evaluation of the superintendent.
So this one looks really messy. So if you, just to kind of move ahead a little bit on the, and we don't have to discuss this, but just to make you aware, on the agenda, if you look down at number 7, where it says CBI-E, evaluation of superintendent, there was a little bit of redundancy in these two policies. So the one that we're looking at right now, CBI, is a combination of the policy CBI that is currently in our policy manual, as well as the one that is further on the agenda to be possibly deleted from our policy manual, puts the two together.
Mr. Bopala.
There are no new additions.
I don't believe there are any, no, I don't believe there were any new additions. It really was taking the two and putting them together.
Questions? Comments? Motion? Mr. Bopala?
Make a motion to approve CBI evaluation of superintendent.
Second? Second by Ms. Eames. Any further discussion? All in favor? So moved. 8-0. The last item in number 6 is 6H. It's policy BEDI, school committee relations with the media.
So this policy is a new policy to our policy manual. It is, again, one of the policies that was not included in our policy manual, that when we went through the audit was recommended that it be added. This policy is a policy that first came up, I believe, in June. We brought it to the committee, and Member Scott asked some clarifying questions. We went back to the state suggested language and the samples that we had. I brought it back to the policy subcommittee for further conversation. And so we bring it to you tonight to using the same language that was there in June when we had the conversation. So I just wanted to be clear about that, because we did Member Scott had asked for some clarification on the language. And the language that we have here is the language that the state has recommended.
Ms. Parks.
I think I think all of us have probably received some feedback about this. I think that an important thing to note, and maybe we should have included the language in the policy to be more specific, if after a meeting, somebody from the media reaches out to you and says, why did you vote that way? You're allowed to speak on why you voted that way. I think that this policy is more specifically saying, like, if there's a statement that's coming from the committee as a whole, that statement should be coming from the chair. I don't think that this is meant to limit everybody's individual rights to speak to the media on the way they vote, their take on things. I think that this is just more specifically about a group statement would come from the chair, if that makes sense. Did I say that right? Okay.
Mr. Bopala.
Yes, Mrs. Parks, thank you for clarifying that. I felt after all the information we received, both email and in person, that if someone asked me why I voted a certain way or how I felt a certain way, I'd be comfortable in addressing it, but anything that talks about the collective school committee. So thank you for clarifying that.
That's how I read it. I don't know if I'm the only one, but that's how I'm reading it.
Ms. Scott?
And that's how I see it as well. And I think it's important to recognize that that's exactly what this means, is that, you know, excuse me, the school committee collectively votes as a body, together as one. We're not individuals when we're voting. City councilors vote individually as one on a particular item, which is why the chair generally, and this has been the way I understood it for years now, was the spokesperson for the school committee when a statement needed to be made with the superintendent in order to get that information out to the public. This does not necessarily mean, though, that if the newspaper comes up to you after, I mean, I would never encourage anybody to not speak just for themselves, though. That would, I think, would be the most important thing. So I couldn't speak for how Megan voted. I shouldn't be speaking for how Megan voted if the press is asking me, right? Because one of the things that we know as school committee members is that we shouldn't disparage any other school committee member. So I think that's the important piece to recognize here, is that we're speaking for ourselves individually. And when it's a statement about a particular issue, it should come from the chair speaking for all of us.
Ms. Hurd?
Thank you. I particularly like this policy because I have zero interest in communicating with the media. So I will continue to use you as a scapegoat and send them your way.
Okay, fair enough. Mr. Superintendent.
So because we got correspondence, Karen and I wanted to do a little more research just to make sure, you know, because this came from MSMA, which is a legally represented body that provides input. I mean, we pay for that service and they do a pretty good job. And that's where this language came from. So I sent an email out to area superintendents after we got that last email from a media group, which I didn't recognize personally, so I don't know where it came from. But 7 superintendents have gotten back to me by email since I sent that out. Every one of them uses the MSMA language verbatim, except for one. And they kept all of it. They added more for their committee. And so I just want to make sure this wasn't kind of offhanded, like at least one group made it seem. And I did reach out to folks from our local organization that reached out to us last week in writing, just to see if they had more thoughts or follow-up. And I think we had a good dialogue, but I just want to make sure you knew that Karen and I said, well, where's this seeming interest coming from, to make sure we're doing it right. And according to other districts and MSMA, we are in fact doing this the right way, if it's best.
Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, when I was reading that, one of the last emails we got from that organization, I think they were trying to, in my opinion, try to scare us a little bit, trying to say that we might be overstepping like the law with the Freedom of Information Act and all that, but that wasn't where we're going. So I wasn't really too concerned about their comments.
Mr. Beauplan?
Thank you. I don't want to criticize the hard work of the policy committee, but do you think we should have some sort of an addendum in there that reflects that we can speak our own opinions if addressed, but do not reflect individual opinions as far as the school committee?
Ms. Park?
I believe in our procedural rules, there's something that spells that out already. I would have to double check to be sure, but I remember at one point there was something in the procedural rules that specified that we can speak for ourselves, we can speak for our constituents, but we cannot speak for the whole committee. We can't say, I represent the Lewiston School Committee and this is how we feel, but we can say, I voted this way because this is how I feel. And I think that's already spelled out in our procedural rules, I think.
Thank you. I withdraw my concern.
Ms. Scott, are you all set with this? Any other comments? Seeing none, I would take a motion. Mr. Beauplan?
Relations with the media policy.
The second? Ms. Eames, the second?
I will second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? That's 8-0. Thank you, everyone. That got through quite a number of our existing policies. it's good to be that we're reviewing these. I mean, I realize it's a ongoing process and it takes quite a bit of time, but it's I find it helpful to review these things as well. The next item on the agenda is item 7. This is to review and potentially vote on the deletion of some existing policies. The first one is A is CBI-E, evaluation of the superintendent, which I think Ms. Paquette's pretty well laid out already, unless she has something else to add to it.
No, I'll just reiterate again. This was put into that other policy, all of these items.
Ms. Whitlow,
I'll make a motion to approve the deletion of CBI-E, evaluation of superintendent.
is
I will second that.
this is second by Ms. Hurd. Any further discussion? All in favor? So moved. Second item is CF, School Building Administration.
So the next 2 or 3 are similar in that they are really a job description of the school, of the administration, and then the other items that we'll get to. So it's just recommended that this is not part of our policy manual because it is a part of our job description. And that we chose 2 or 3 to put in that we had 2 or 3 in the policy manual and not all of our job descriptions. And this isn't a complete job description. So that was the recommendation through the audit, to have this particular one removed. And I'll speak to the others in a moment.
Comments? Mr. Bowe-Palat.
Thank you again. Just to clarify, this information is in the job description for building administrators. Thank you.
This along with other specific job-related duties.
Anyone else? Ms. Bowden?
I was just gonna make a motion to go ahead and delete these if everyone else is finished with their comments.
Okay,
Great.
so we're voting currently on CF.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have we have a motion by Ms. Bowden, second by Ms. Whitlow. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? So moved. 8-0. Next item is C, which is CF-E, school administration defined.
Again, this is a policy that was suggested to be deleted. It really just says who school administration is. And again, we define that in a variety of other places.
Ms. Whitlow.
Yeah, and we have a bargaining unit that lays out exactly who is in that, so we don't need a policy. And I'll motion to approve the deletion of school building administrations defined.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? So we have a motion by Ms. Whitlow and second by Ms. Hurd on CF-E. All in favor? So moved. The next item on the agenda is CFA, program directors.
Again, it's the same recommendation. The program directors, I believe that's speaking to LRTC directors, adult ed directors of those type of positions. And again, as Ms. Whitlow said, they're in the contract as well as in our job description. So not really needed in our policy manual.
Ms. Whitlow.
I'll approve the deletion of program directors policy.
Okay. And because we have a motion by Ms. Whitlow, seconded by Ms. Bowden. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? So moved. The next item is ECHD, administration in the absence of policy.
Sorry, I was reading the policy, waiting for him to keep going. I was reading sorry. So this one is the same. This one is actually talked about in the school superintendent job description. So in CB and CBR that you just approved, it talks about basically the superintendent's authority when there isn't a policy that guides the decision making.
Questions, comments? Ms. Whitlow,
I'll go ahead and make a motion to delete administration in the absence of policy.
second? Second by Ms. Bowden. Further discussion? All in favor? So moved. And the last one is CHCAA, Student Handbooks.
So this one should not have been under deletion. This one should not have been on deletions. It should have been under to review for a first read. So I'm not sure how we need to handle that with the agenda.
It can be tabled or just a motion, and we
We-
can bring it back as a first read next time.
Is that the best thing to do, or is the committee okay with moving it back up and putting it in as make a motion to approve it as a first read? Ms. Whitlow?
I think, not sure what the term is. We've set precedent since last meeting that if there's something on the agenda that the public doesn't have information on, we should not go ahead and do any voting on it. So I'd like to table it for next time. It's not a pressing thing anyways, but.
Okay, so there's a motion to table. Is there a second? Ms. Horton? Any further?
I actually didn't officially make a motion, but I will make that motion.
Okay, so there's a motion by Ms. Whitlow to table CHCAA. There's a motion by Ms. Whitlow, seconded by Ms. Hurd. Any further discussion? All in favor of tabling? So moved. Okay. The next item on the agenda is agenda item number 8, to receive an update on the mobile lab grant.
So I can just jump in real quickly with this. We try to keep you posted on grants and things that we've applied for, but we've applied for and feel pretty good about a number of mobile labs that could come by way of state funding to support the sciences, STEM, technology. And we thought initially when we applied for the grant that we could get 1 or 2 or a handful for our district that would potentially be moved around. So they're like carts essentially. And we found out that we could apply for 1 for every 100 kids that we have. And so we looked at space, usage, potentially layout, talked with our IT team and worked with our grant folks. And I believe is it 15 that we ultimately applied for, but could be a neat thing that comes into the district. Just want to make sure you're aware that we've applied for that. And we're kind of excited that they're presenting them as they could be a lot of fun, again, around VR, STEM, coding, those kinds of very specific technology fields that are coming through the market.
Ms. Hurd?
Thank you. This might be a good opportunity for our pre-K program as they currently don't participate in any extracurriculars, like they don't have gym or STEM or music or library or anything. This might be a good opportunity to get them sort of involved in some different things, even if it's just like one thing, to kind of give them idea of what's coming once they start kindergarten, because then those things do start.
I just wanted, I can respond and say they would be available to all students in the school. So that's certainly something as we program that we will consider. That's a great idea. I did just want to add that these carts are available to us through some remaining COVID relief funds that the state, we, as you know, schools received the funds through the state of Maine. And then once those funds were spent or not spent, they needed to be returned to the state of Maine. So this is a reallocation of the CRF funds from a few months ago, a year ago. And so this is a reallocation. And so we are fortunate to be able, and they reworked the application and the guidelines as to what this money was going to be used for. So this is a great addition to our already, I think it's a pretty robust computer science program in our district. And of course, we'll always take more and provide more opportunities, but this was a good opportunity for us to sort of in supplement some of those things through this grant. So we're really excited.
We only applied for 15, not 53. Real estate issues. Well, that's fantastic. If we get them, will we know how long it will take before we know?
We actually applied, it was due on Friday, and I think we got it back Friday night that we were approved. So yes, we've been approved, and we'll start working with the vendors to place the orders and get them in.
Yeah. Great. Must be a record in the turnaround on something like that. Ms. Whitlow.
Yeah, will there be any reporting that's due on these?
So there is some professional development that the state will require us to participate in. And then I believe the follow-up reporting is really just a summary of how you've used them and how you've increased students' awareness and introduction to programs as Ms. Hurd was talking about.
And who, like, what person, I guess, would be in charge of those? Would that, like, the reports, you or a certain department? Because this is for the whole district, right?
So Jenny Darrigan, who takes care of all of our federal grants, she's the one who worked with all of us to put the application through, and she'll be responsible for reporting out on that.
Just going to add that to her plate. She's done a fantastic job. Anything else about this? Seeing nothing. Agenda item number 9 is to receive an update on Through the Glass grant.
Karen's going to speak to this, but I said to Cheryl, if it's Through the Glass or something to that effect, but really it's about a training program and trying to help again with the pathways for teachers to grow in their expertise in teaching and learning. So Karen's going to speak to it much more elegantly than I did, because I gave the wrong name, but the idea is you can observe good instruction, or you can observe instruction to provide feedback without being in the space, which is a big plus. Because whenever you go into a room and sit down and observe, it changes the dynamics of the teaching and learning. And so this is a step in that direction.
You were close. It's behind the glass. I was like, what's through the glass? So very excited to share that we've been working with the University of Maine at Orono and the Galen Cole, Susan and Galen Cole Foundation for quite some time. And that collaboration has allowed for us to receive other funds in past years to help train teachers and allow students to have some opportunities to go to the museum in Bangor if you've never done so. It's a great opportunity. So these funds were awarded to Lewiston Public Schools. It's $20,000 to create a behind the glass facility, which will ultimately we would call a literacy center. And that literacy center, we already have the space at Connors. And when we built Connors, we did put a glass in this space. But unfortunately, the glass is too high. It's too high up. You can't really use it for what it's intended to be used for. So we were looking for some other funds to create this other section of the school to allow within that same configuration to allow for this behind the glass. And so they have awarded us $20,000 to put in a bigger, more appropriate glass with a sound system that will allow for us to not only use this center for our own teachers, but to invite other teachers who are working with students in interventions and reading recovery and other literacy interventions and other interventions as well, or even observe students working with staff in other ways to be able to do that in a more efficient and effective way.
Ms. Eames.
When you say in a one-way mirror, or do you mean glass?
So yes, it's a one-way mirror. But it's yes, it's a one-way mirror.
Ms. Hurd.
Thank you. So attending the University in Orono in early childhood development, I have had the honor of sitting in a room like this for long periods of time, observing many. They're actually like their preschool daycare program there. And it is very beneficial because, as you said, as soon as someone comes into the room, it's disruption. Everybody wants to talk and hang and ask your name and how many pets you have and all the things. So I think this is a great opportunity, and I'm looking forward to not only helping our own teachers, but other teachers in the community to come in and take a peek and see what they can learn.
Mr. Bopalan.
Just to clarify, is this anyway an evaluation technique? Will teachers volunteer for inclusion in it?
Great question. Actually, no, it's not an evaluation. It's part of coursework that teachers, for the most part, is part of coursework that teachers participate in. They would get feedback from their peers and from the instructor. That's sort of the university piece of it, but it's also to be used for ongoing professional development. So for teachers to just, as Megan said, observe and be able to have conversations about what they're seeing without disrupting what's actually happening on the other side of the glass.
Ms. Scott.
Thank you. We have these at Sandcastle, and they're a phenomenal tool. So, and especially when we're working with some of our special needs kids, any other adult that comes into the room can really change the dynamics of the room, as you said. So, it's a great tool. It's a great tool even for those that are regularly in the classroom. Sometimes I'll go in there to see how the kids are behaving with other adults. It's really a phenomenal tool because you can do that. But also parents we've had come in that felt maybe a little uncomfortable with how the situation might be at school, just because they don't know, not uncomfortable with the school, but just because they weren't sure and stuff. And they get to see how the interactions are happening. So, and it's not like a mirror. It is a mirror. You can see yourself in it, and you can see and on the other side too. But if you kind of get close, you could also kind of see through too. So it's not fully like a police mirror type thing.
Ms. Hurd.
Thank you. Is there an opportunity for our local colleges to potentially use this space as part of their curriculum?
Yeah, I think that's definitely worth a conversation. Just like the use of any of our other spaces, we would be willing to have a conversation about that. I will say the space that this glass will be put in they're not full-size classrooms. They're a little bit smaller. They are intervention spaces, if you will. So it does not allow us to see a full classroom in session necessarily, but definitely we could use it for small groups or for individuals or for something of that nature as well.
Anyone else? Okay. We'll move on. The next item is agenda item number 10, report from school committee chair. I really don't have anything to add from last week. Just we're moving along, and later on the agenda, we've got to talk about the administrator's contract, but beyond that, things are good so far. Agenda item number 11 is report from the superintendent.
I have a few things. One is on the 14th of November. We have a scheduled meeting here. We also have an invitation for the NEASC, or the New England Accreditation for Schools and Colleges, visiting the high school. And so there's an invitation for us to be here a bit early on that night at 4:30. Just want to put it on your radar. Last Saturday, the Green Ladle had their open house here, and it was an absolute full house. The food was fantastic. The kids did a great job. I just want to share, we had one student, his name is Logan. I don't recall his last name, I apologize. But he was working on a saute station. He's making chicken dishes. And one member of the community walked up to the serving station and said, "How do you make this? This is really good." And he walked her through the prep of the chicken, dredging it through flour, how they fry it, how they deglaze it. It was wonderful to hear, because it's the goal of the program for students to really understand that culinary exposure and that customer service piece. And he was as genuine as could be. And I went up to him afterwards and told him how proud I was to even hear him give that explanation. It was really great. But if you went station to station, students were able to speak about what they were serving you and how they made it, and they made it. And that they came up with the menus for these things and tried to have a good mix of things. But if you left here hungry, it was your fault. There was so much food, it was unbelievable. They had some music outside. It was really great. Exciting news, I guess, for me and for the committee, who is my boss. I did my recertification completion work presentation last Friday morning to a panel of my peers, and I was approved for recertification. So I have permission to stay certified and keep working. Next week, I head off to a conference for superintendents I'm excited about. So Karen's going to be the first phone call for people, but I'm sure I'll still be connected to things. I did share with you an email with an address in it today for a piece that Channel 6 did about our teachers and ed techs and working in collaboration with Central Maine Community College, using state and Alfond dollars to bridge the gap from some of our folks that have an emergency waiver or just want to continue to grow in the teaching and learning field. And it's a real opportunity, I think, for our community. So we've got a lot of phone calls from people that want to find out, well, how did you do this? And how did you pull that off? And really, it's an attribute to the team. Here in Lewiston Public Schools, we had this idea a while back of how we can further support our teachers, because we know there's a shortage. We know people want to learn. This is just one thing that is on the docket. So when we talk about the observation glass, we talk about these kinds of programs. We've also used some ESSER dollars to compensate teachers that are not necessarily mentors, but someone who is specifically looking out for new staff to make sure they know, hey, what's up next? What's the pace of the curriculum? Do you need anything? So again, some additional supports, but we're really trying to find ways to do that work. And we're excited about it. We're just trying to bridge opportunities for people. And the nice thing is, cost wise, there's $1,200 per individual that signs up this year, and the same again next year. So it also reduces the cost on the district directly for those who want to pursue this pathway. And that's it for me.
Ms. Whitlow.
Are you able to tell us a little bit about what your presentation was on for your recertification?
I can tell you all about it. So we set goals through this process. Actually, mine were set back in 2020. So I did a survey with some people at the high school at the time and some other colleagues that I work with. And my scope ended up narrowing down to 3 specific areas: communications, organizational structures, and also curriculum. And the 3 areas that I focused on, one was the development of safety protocols and training, which is, as you know, something I'm pretty vested in. So it was easy to talk about the things that I had learned in that process and the things that we've done. Another was around the equity journey and the work we've done there as a district, to be really deliberate about all the way back, for those of you who were on the last committee, with just our equity work, We shifted, I believe, almost a dozen policies in and around equity through an audit process. So just that work continues, and we talk about ruler and SEL and building in equity. And the last piece was around community involvement and what things I've learned over the last several years, especially as a superintendent, with how important it is to go out and to not just stay in and invite people in, but to get involved with the community in different ways. And it actually resonated, came full circle for me, because last Friday afternoon, I met Zam Zam for lunch, because I think everybody knows Zam Zam, at the Heritage Restaurant. And I love the rice, by the way. If anybody's watching, go have the rice at the Heritage Restaurant. But I was sitting there and it just felt so natural to be in the space. And then I was thinking to myself that years ago, I don't think people did this. And it's not an attribute to any one individual. I think it's a collaborative effort. And when you spend more time in spaces that you might not have otherwise spent time, you really get more and more comfortable. And I think that's two-way. And I think that's a critical component. So that was the gist of it. And of course, I've got documents and slides and all that stuff. So
Well, I won't ask for those. But when you do your presentation, there's a board, and is it your peers, or like who is on that board?
yeah, so it's a board that's made up for our region. And I think there was 6 different schools or different communities represented, but they're all administrators. There's no superintendent on that board currently, but it's all administrators, again, spread out, and there's a specific process we follow as superintendents. Yep.
Mr. Beaumont.
Yeah, thank you. Back to the Green Ladle just for a moment. Are we currently with the new director, or is it still Chef Karen that's on that?
So a little bit of both. So Chef Karen's going to be with us for a little while longer. I think it's until the end of December, or somewhere thereabouts. And then Chef Tony Scherer has started to come on, and he's working day to day so he can shadow and understand the processes around the student certifications and the culinary program that's been built. So we are scheduled for a very smooth transition. And Tony's been great with the kids, and I think that's our number one piece. I think there's lots of great chefs out there who don't have the touch to work with kids, students that are this age. And he's really shown already that he does, and his knife skills are fantastic.
Okay. Well, that's exciting great. Congratulations, Jake. And good stuff. The next item is report from city council reps, item number 12. Ms. Scott.
Thank you. I really don't have anything to report because we haven't had a meeting yet. We have a meeting tomorrow evening. I can give you a brief rundown on what we are discussing tomorrow night. We start with a workshop discussing lodging houses and recovery houses. We've also got a discussion on a draft for a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. Tomorrow evening, we will be recognizing Dan Karen, chef at the Green Ladle. The mayor will be recognizing him tomorrow. And also tomorrow evening, since you just brought up Zam Zam, I will be presenting Zam Zam with my Lewiston Leads pin. She just recently moved into my ward, and when I found out, I couldn't think of anybody else that I wanted to. I mean, if there's anybody that represents a leader in Lewiston, it's Zam Zam. So we'll be doing that tomorrow evening as well. And then our regular agenda items starting at 7 o'clock with 3 executive sessions to follow. Also this week we're getting really into the crux of the Androscoggin County budget. That's in the process right now. The budget committee is meeting every week. And I also have a meeting with the Lewiston Youth Advisory Council on Thursday to work more on their mental health awareness. And I think I'm sorry, I just thought of this. Jake, I think that they reached out to you about possibly you tweeting out some messages when they get those ready. They're working on some slogans now, so.
Yeah, I've been in communication with Dottie about using the platform to spread the word. It's such a great cause.
Thank you, Linda. Next item is a report from the student rep. We're that we know this was very last minute for you, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourselves, and if you have something that you'd like to bring to us, go for it.
About myself? I'm a senior at Lewiston High School. I lived in Lewiston my whole life. Like I was born here. I don't really have anything that's like I could say about myself. I don't know. I felt nice to be nominated to represent like my grade because I'm a very vocal speaker when it comes to things. I like to speak out a lot. I didn't used to do that as a kid though. But then once I started hitting like high school, I started like speaking out more and like being more eventful.
Are you like part of the student council there, or?
I'm part of the student council for LRTC. I applied for it and then I got it. So I'm part of student council for LRTC. I volunteered a lot with St. Mary's. I do like, yeah, I just do like volunteer work sometimes, but that's basically it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bopalon.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could share your goals post high school, and are there any issues you would like to see the school committee bring up and discuss?
Post high school, I am thinking about attending college. I'm not sure which though, but I want to study psychology when I get out of school. Some issues right now, I don't really have any issues on the top of my head, but I would like to speak to other students about them, what issues they would like to talk about, and then once they report to me, I'll report to you guys.
Thank you. What are you studying in LRTC right now? Which program are you in?
Right now I'm in the CNA program, which is basically I'm like learning how to help with people who need help, who aren't able to help themselves. And yeah, I chose that program because I really feel like helping people a lot, because I've taken care of like my grandpa was sick before and I've taken care of him. And like, I just like taking care of people.
So welcome. I'm so happy you're here. It's so good to see a student sitting across from me and being involved. So thank you so much for coming and welcome.
Thank you for having me here.
Ms. Parks.
Thank you for being here. Welcome. I've been on this committee for 7 years, so I've gone through a lot of different students, and some have been more engaged and vocal than others. And so I'm glad to hear that you are very outspoken, because I want as often as possible for you to bring back feedback from the students, from the school, what's going on, all of that stuff. We want to hear it. We don't get to see that. And so we hope you share that all with us. And I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. I just feel like it's better for like everyone's voices to be heard and just not like one person. And it's good to get people's other opinions. And I feel like some people want to be vocal speakers, but then they're too shy about it and feel like they'll be shunned for like sharing their opinion.
One thing that you want to make sure you know, if we're discussing something as the committee and you'd like to be recognized to say something, which is very valuable to us, please jump in. You know, I'll try to make sure that I recognize you and you know, we want you to, we need your input because you're closer to it than any of us can be. So, Ms. Whitlow.
Yeah, I just had a question about surveying or asking other students and taking polls or however you do it. Just curious of what tool you might use or how you go about engaging other students with conversations and feedback.
I could make polls. I wouldn't like to flex, but I'm kind of popular. Like I know a lot of students. It's because I know a lot of students because I talk a lot. If I'm very honest, I am a chatterbox. So I like to talk to everyone and become friends with everyone. And my friends kind of find it weird when I'm walking through the hallways and I say hi to like everyone. But I like to engage with others. But I could make polls and I usually just speak to others, or I'll speak to even teachers too. Like I'll just ask like, what are you guys' opinions? Because I tell people like if you guys want to let me know, because like I'm representative, like I go to these school board meetings. If you guys want anything to be let known, just please let me know.
Great. Well, welcome. We look forward to your input. Anyone else? I guess that's the end of the Inquisition for you.
And she'll have a name text.
Yes, yeah, we'll get that. Subcommittees. Mr. Vogel.
Thank you. I'd like to make sure that we recognize the members of the subcommittee, Ms. Hurd and Ms. Eames, as well as myself. We have the next meeting scheduled, the date for Monday, October 17th, the hour preceding our school committee meeting. Also, I'd like to reflect that math will be the content area that will come under discussion this year. And we're awaiting the formation of that so that we can reserve those day-long dates in our calendar if we can make it. Thank you.
Other subcommittees. Ms. Whitlow.
So yes, the administrator contract went well. We'll be discussing that in a little bit. I did want to mention and just kind of talk to Ms. Paquette about dyslexia subcommittee. We haven't really done anything with that in a while, and I'd like to get that on the books, and let's schedule and let's bring everybody back to the table again. I know for a while we were just kind of meeting with the assistant superintendent and Sue Williams, and it was just kind of us three a few times, but I think we need to get going again with this. I don't think there's much else. We have a policy subcommittee meeting on Thursday. Yeah.
Facilities, we are working on a couple of different things. One with JCI and one with Siemens. We're also hopefully having an interview with a third vendor, potentially to look at some of the projects that have been identified in the audit. So that's an ongoing piece of it. And I know at one point we had talked about potentially getting a look at the boiler project at the middle school. Is that I assume that's not quite ready to be looked at this point? They're close, so maybe in December or January.
I was thinking maybe in November.
Maybe in November. Okay. Yeah, I think that would be interesting. I don't know how many of you have ever been down there. Those of us that have, it's insightful, I guess is the best way to put it. I'm not sure that many folks would recognize all the work that has to go into doing that, but interesting renovation of that space. And we've got a couple of other projects there, one dealing with the auditorium and one dealing with the cafeteria and gym. And there is a major energy project that we're reviewing at this point. So that's facilities. I think if there's anything else. I can't think of any other subcommittees that are up at the moment. So that being said, we'd move on to item number 15, which is community announcements. Anyone with community announcement? Miss.
I think the harvest, that school committee community announcement, never mind. I was just thinking that this week there's a harvest dinner Wednesday night. I know I can't make that food event either, which I went last year and it was a lot of fun. It was great weather last year and there was a really great turnout. I don't know what the weather's going to be like this year, but I don't even remember the food. I just remember like the socialization and the music, and it was a really good time just to kind of see people you probably hadn't seen in a while. And I mean, the food I'm sure was great too, but.
Ms. Scott.
Harvest dinner, it's put on by the Chamber of Commerce, and it is with several restaurants in downtown Lewiston. They close off part of Lisbon Street from Ash Street to Main Street. I believe they went all the way to Main Street last year, and they set up several tables on Lisbon Street, and they have, Sonder and Dram has something, Boba has something, Orchid had something. It was great because you could go around to each restaurant, had a table outside last year where you could get your food, and then you had a table that you could go sit at with all your friends, and it was a great event. And unfortunately, I can't make it this year either, but I would encourage everybody to, if they can, go.
Mr. Vopala?
I'd just like to recognize that Farwell Elementary School is having their Pumpkin Fest October 16th, 9 to 3. With my first son, who's 42 now, I remember being with the group. They've been doing it forever, it seems, and it's a nice community gathering. It's more than just the pumpkins, it's the vendors and everybody else, and it's a really fun time. So if we could need a pumpkin, it would be nice to support them by buying it there.
Thank you. Ms. Bowden?
Thank you. I just wanted to remind anyone who's watching, there's no school on Friday and there's no school on Monday. No, there is not.
4-day weekend.
It's a 4-day weekend. And I actually learned that today as well. Well, yes, there's a teacher workshop on Friday. But it's a no student day on Friday, and then it's a holiday on Monday. So I learned that today when looking at the calendar, and I thought I would just share it in case no one else was paying attention either.
You had mentioned the pumpkin festival. Pumpkin, is that what it is? Pumpkin Fest? What school is that at? Farwell. I've heard of it a few times, but I've never been to it. I had no idea that you could buy your pumpkins there. I've just heard, I thought it was like face painting or what. I'm sure maybe that's part of it. But that's very good part of it to know that you can buy your pumpkins there. So great, thank you. And last year I do remember Mother India had the best food, some curry, rice. Oh my God, it was the best. So thank you for the reminder of the restaurants.
Anything else from anyone? Okay. Item number 16 is future agenda items. Mr. Vopala?
Thank you. Last meeting, we put 3 things for future agenda items, the issue of the cannabis test strips, the school prayer location, and the homework policy. Has there been any movement, or where do we go from there to enact it or do something?
Yeah, so we've actually started research, and the policy subcommittee's already reached out with some thoughts on how we're going to go about talking about these pieces. I've reached out to some other places about the cannabis swabs just to see how other folks use them and see if they have policy that exists. So I would say we're in the next stage of research before we bring it back, but we do intend to bring, I think, all of those pieces back. And policy subcommittee, I think, is looking at homework already scheduled.
Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, I had reached out to Ms. Paquette today, just to say, like, do we have any policies right now that talk about religion in schools and that type of thing? Not that I think that would be religion in school and prayer room are a little different. But I did start doing a bunch of research today as well. So I've pulled up a lot of like court cases and things like that, just to kind of get a grasp on how religion is viewed and, and all that. So I think I'm excited about the conversation, and I don't know where it's going to go, but I think it's going to be it might be a hot topic, but it shouldn't be. And that's in my opinion. But I'm excited to talk about that.
Ms. Bowden?
Thank you. I just don't know if I've said it out loud. I was thinking it on our last meeting when we talked about the cannabis strips. But I was hoping that our district could look into some sort of detector for the bathrooms, specifically at the high school and the middle school, that detect vape smoke.
So I can share a little bit if that's okay, Mr. Chair. We got a quote to install some vape detectors at the Lewiston High School, and it was about $210,000. And so I was quick to try to consider some other things, because it almost mirrored how short we were to complete our surveillance and camera project. So adding another 210 was a tough thing at the time, but as budgets play out, it may be something we want to look at. I've also heard from some other districts, and this is anecdotal, I don't have proof of it, and I don't want to discredit any products that exist, but the kids have learned how to mess with them. So they don't do anything when they have been tampered with. And so some of the devices they have do more than just vape detection, though. They can detect medical emergencies, loud sounds, fooling around, fights, things like that. There's an auditory processor in it, or audio processor in it, sorry. So there's some neat things out there, but the cost to install them is a run of power for each one. It goes back to a server system. It has monitoring software that has licensing fees, you know, that kind of stuff. So we do have a quote that I could bring to share.
So I'm just curious, is there like a grant we could look into? Is there some sort of like funding that could maybe help us out? Because when we're talking about stopping drug use in our schools and finding a way to do that in a private place like a bathroom, like we really don't have any other option other than something that will detect that. So is there something we could look into for funding help?
Yeah, we can look around for sure. Yeah.
I know there was a discussion about whether there were private spaces for nursing mothers or to pump. Have we identified that in each of the buildings?
That exists in every building and has for years. So if there's any concerns there, we would address it immediately. That's state law on top of it all, but we worked actually to support as a school system. A lot of our employees are family folks who, especially young moms. So we support that and actually have some pretty decent facilities for that.
Okay.
But if I could, for Mr. Volpel, one of the things that you had mentioned was prayer in school or spaces. And so we've done, again, preliminary research. This isn't anything formal, but just so you know that we're working on the topic. We have done a little bit of research. I've reached out to Portland. I think that they may have some spaces, and I reached out to that superintendent. So Javier is really good at getting back, so I'm sure he will. Also, some rough guidelines that you can have a designated space. There's different names for them. You got to be careful with the name so that it's not denominational. This space has to be neutral. It has to be supervised. Those supervising cannot participate in any activities that students choose to participate in. It cannot be during instructional time. So it has to be during unstructured time. There may have been another component there, but we're pulling together criteria. The one thing that's given me pause so far is supervision. And so we may get to a point where we're talking about, are we funding supervision? Are we looking for volunteers that are not going to participate in a denominational way? But I mean, I certainly think it's all feasible. Another big concern that we have here, and not that this should deter us for this kind of work, is just space. I know we have the expansion of the high school that might have freed some things up, but we still have a few teachers that move rooms class to class. And our elementary schools are packed right now. So, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a classroom. So there could be some other options out there. I just want to make sure we do thorough research and bring it back.
Anything else under future agenda items? Seeing none, I take a motion to enter into executive session to discuss negotiations in accordance with 1 MRSA 405D.
So moved.
Second.
Was Elizabeth? Oh, Janet, and then Tanya. So there's a motion by Ms. Bowden and seconded by Ms. Whitlow. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, we are in executive session.